Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, a show that examines all aspects of sexuality, from physical to emotional to spiritual. Join our hosts as they discuss age-old questions, common misconceptions, and the latest topics surrounding sex. They'll tackle topics about sexuality from the complicated to the hilarious and everything in between. GSMC Sex Podcast is your show for all of your questions about sex, even some you might not have thought of yet.
Hello and welcome to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson. And before I start off, I want to share with you that I am partnering with a company called Care Of. Now, what Care Of is, it's a subscription service that delivers vitamins and supplements which are customized for your specific health needs. Now, you take a short quiz, answer a few questions about your diet, your lifestyle, fitness, and health goals, and Care Of will put together a personalized plan just for you. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that after my first break. But I want to jump into the subject here of those, when you first started being intimate with your partner, how did you go about getting into that? I know that, you have a relationship and you think about all of these various things that you're going to do. People talk about, well, I just want a friend to go to the park with, or go grocery shopping with, or to take drives with. And, do you say that because that's what you want, or is that just a way to get into the conversation about being with this person so that you can get to the other stuff, and the other stuff being sex? I think being sexual is something that we are inclined to want to do. It is part of us as human beings. But how do some of us get into having those intimate conversations? I mean, do we try to slick our way into, get really, try to think of creative ways that you can have that? Because, when you're talking to shy people, you just don't imagine them really having that conversation. You just, how do you make suggestions? I mean, do you pass notes? What do you do? I mean, I think about, myself when I was a lot younger, and I think you felt like, well, you couldn't really talk about sex, S-E-X, because it seemed like, oh, well, that's all you wanted. And I think when you're young, yeah, that's kind of what you do. It's like you're wired to that. Your hormones are raging and you're getting things in check. When you get a little older, then it is something that you do in balance. I mean, you have other parts of your life that have to exist also. And if you're, of a certain age, you have to get a job. You have to earn some income so that you can, because, we want a car for transportation where those things don't run for free. And if you have to buy your own car, then you got to pay for the insurance and the gas and the upkeep. So, yeah, sex is on your mind, but it's in the background while you're trying to earn a little bit of money so that you can do things other than just sit at home and be bored. But when it comes to the companionship part of this, and you're thinking about trying to, okay, well, who do I want to be with? And, there's all kinds of choices. There's the shy person, then there's a person who's really outgoing and really charismatic. And it really depends on your personality, what you're attracted to. And if you're attracted to a shy person, well, how do you have conversations about sex with them without feeling too terribly awkward? And then, there's that thing that, well, if you say too much, then they're going to walk off and tell, wow, what's that going to feel like? Well, they tell people that you were interested in having sex. And when you're young, that can kind of hang over your head and you feel like, wow, that wasn't something to talk about. Now, when you're a little older, yeah, and it's already been a part of your life, then, well, you just say, okay, well, I may not be compatible with that person because they just don't have that kind of life's experience yet, but eventually they will. But again, thinking about how do you begin that intimate conversation, or that conversation about intimacy, I should say, and talking about sex. I know I kind of talked about it in a roundabout way, talking about other people and what they did, and sometimes maybe it's the trouble that they got into because they were doing such and such, and that kind of leads you into the topic of sex, and not about yourself specifically, but you're kind of talking about it like it's over there. It's something that those people do. And if it's something that happened, you heard about one of your teenage friends that got pregnant, then wow, the conversation is, wow, they should have used birth control. And you kind of get into it that way. And then you kind of find out just from the level of conversation how much that other person knows. So how do you start? If you're talking to somebody who may not be so open about talking about it, well, you kind of nibble around the edges. You talk about it as if it's not really personal about your own experience, but you talk about what you've heard about somebody else. I mean, I kind of remember it that way. And then as you get more and more into the conversation, then you might share a little more about your knowledge of it. Did you learn something in school? And then, it's the give and take part of that conversation. You share what you've learned, and you can listen to see what they learned. And I kind of remember doing that. And when people have siblings, older siblings, you might hear that older sibling talk about it, or talk about somebody that they went out with and some of the things that they did. Some of the things were like, yeah, well, it was interesting. And other things are like, ugh, why did they do that? And I remember when I was in middle school, as we call it, where there were some people who were sexually active, and they had sort of a reputation. And, people like to gossip. So you'd hear things about certain individuals. And some of this stuff was really salacious. I don't know how much of it you can really believe. I think it was just the curiosity factor that everybody kind of wanted to be in on the conversation. So they lend their ear to whatever was being said. And, down the road, you find out that a lot of the stuff was just hype because sex was on their minds. And you know how people are. They fill in the blanks. They make up stories about a lot of other people and things that they saw. And you can't believe a lot of that stuff. But just as that, and as you live through that, as you grow through that, you hope that it's never your experience, that you're the one that they are talking about in such a negative way. Because that's an easy way to feel like, you get a reputation and then you get scarred for. When I say scarred, you have the impression that people don't like you and you're an outcast, and people will say some really really mean things about you. And when you're young, people start saying things like that about you. It sort of hurts. It kind of catch you. It kind of knocks you back for a loop. And nobody wants to feel like they have a reputation that gets damaged, because we all wear these masks about who we are. And when something like that comes up, because, sex is like really the big thing when you're young, then, because they're all kind of experimenting with it and trying to learn. And, what do we really learn? If we learned it in a classroom, we can kind of trust that at least we're learning from somebody that knows. And a lot of people hear about things on the streets. And, and if people, if you've got older relatives, siblings, that kind of thing, you overhear their conversations, and maybe they have magazines or movies or videos, and they talk about the latest thing they saw or some other gossip. And then, there's the thing where, somebody was caught with so-and-so, and that isn't the person they're supposed to be with. And, that kind of thing travels around really fast. So what you learn a lot of times early on isn't a whole lot about sex per se, but you learn about these stories around it and these reputations that you get if you're engaged in it. And it all seems like it's very dramatic and tragic. And sometimes it's really hard to feel good and safe about it. When you're in the classroom and you're doing the clinical stuff, yeah, you feel like you're learning something. But when you're out there in the world and on the streets, it's just all of this other stuff that's coming at you. And, that really shapes your perception about what sex is, because it's those first things that you learn stick. And what you do in life is you spend a lot of time trying to unlearn some of those first things. And that's why I think it's important that when you learn about sex or how to be around it, that you learn it You learn healthy stuff. Not all of this stuff that comes up off the streets. I'm going to take a break, and I'll be right back. Stay tuned. At the top of the show, I gave a plug to a company I'm partnering with, and it's called Care Of. Now, Care Of is a subscription service that delivers vitamins and supplements which are customized to your specific health needs. You take a short quiz and answer a few questions about your diet, your lifestyle, fitness, and health goals, and Care Of puts together a personalized plan just for you. So you get back into a healthy routine. With summer approaching, let's make health and wellness a priority again. Care Of makes it easy to upgrade your health routine. Now, you give yourself the support this season with a boost. And now, whether you're looking for energy, better sleep, managing your stress, or something else, let's try to get you to feel your healthiest. Now, how do we do that? Care Of has an online quiz which will help you find exactly what you need. Now, it's fun. Now, that online quiz will ask you about your diet, your health goals, lifestyle choices, and it generally takes only about 5 minutes to find out your personal scientifically backed vitamin and supplement recommendations. So you answer these questions like how much sleep you're getting, and are you looking for energy? Do you need something to help support your weight management or healthy hair, skin, and nails? It really gets personalized. So, it can be hard to know what vitamins and supplements you should be taking, but Care Of makes it easy to find out what you specifically need to be your healthiest. They deliver the vitamins, and they come in daily packs, and they're all customized to your recommendations, so you're only taking what you really need. Now, depending upon your Care Of plan, you'll get your daily vitamin packs or protein powder sent right to your door. It's so cute and customized. The packets even say your name on them. So what happens is this: Care Of will make sure that what you're putting into your body comes from the best backed sources, and it's honest guidance, and it's transparency, and it's available to you all on their website. Now they offer protein powders which are available in individual packets for on the go and in tubs. Again, all personalized to your fitness goals and dietary preferences. The vitamin packets are individually wrapped, and they're made from compostable plant-based film that meets the same safety standards. So your vitamins are not only kept fresh, but they are now better for the environment. And here's what else. Vegan and vegetarian supplement options are also available to match your dietary needs and to ensure that you're getting the nutrients you need for those specific diets. So here's how you get the benefit of a 25% off on your first order. You go to takecareof.com, and in the promo code, you write relationship. Again, you go to takecareof.com, and in the promo code, you write relationship, and you're going to get 25% off your first order. So I encourage you to do that. I took the online test and was able to get my vitamins in about a week and a half. So I was able to start in right away. Again, the real convenient thing is when I took the quiz, they made the recommendations, and they all came individually packaged for each day. So I didn't have to buy all the vitamins and then get the little divider, but you put all the pills in and then separate them out. It came to me each day. So that's a good way to also help keep track of it. So I encourage you to go online, take the quiz, get your vitamins, and see what a difference it can make for you. Again, that's takecareof.com, and in the promo code, put in relationship for your 25% off your first order.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Always on the go, but the day just won't be one without your Hollywood fix. Let Golden State Media Concepts Entertainment Podcast take care of that. Jordan and Keith is Entertainment Tonight meets Access Hollywood.
I'm Jordan. The guy laughing, that's Keith.
Yeah, I'm Keith.
An all-inclusive look of pop culture.
Hello and welcome back to Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson. And I've been talking about how you had those early conversations about sex, how you slid into those. And then, out of some of those experiences, I think it shapes our perception, definitely our early perception about sex going forward. And a lot of times, there's a lot of shame around it because we hear the gossip and the stories that go around about people when they're young and they're having sex. You remember when you were in high school or middle school and the sex talk was coming around. It was curious. We had the conversations in the classroom about the clinical stuff because the teacher was giving it to you. And then as being young and being hormonal, you go through those cycles and you're probably experimenting with sex and for a lot of us, it was just more conversation than anything else, mostly wishful thinking. But still, you have those early impressions. And this is where I was talking about how important it is to get it right. Now, this isn't just in sex, but think of all the other things when you learned it kind of wrong in the beginning, and then you had to use the rest of your life to redirect or to unlearn the old stuff and get it right. Well, it's no different with this. I think we get sort of sneaky about watching videos or sneaking a look at magazines, and those things sort of glorify the sex or make it entertainment and even unrealistic because you see actors performing this stuff. Well, what do you think that does to your mind when you really don't have any experience with it? It certainly shapes your perception about what it's supposed to be like. And then you have to get into a relationship and deal with all that relationship stuff and still want to have sex and make it interesting. Being in a relationship is difficult enough. I mean, imagine two bullets hitting themselves in the sky somewhere. I mean, it takes a lot of work to make that happen. And thinking of two people coming together and being in each other's space, getting along well enough to you can get to that level where there's some intimacy and, those feelings, those warm feelings come up and then you wanting to be intimate with somebody. And can you imagine being young and trying to have that conversation? I mean, I can imagine how awkward it is when you don't even have words for some of the things that you're trying to describe. And a lot of people fall back on some sort of word they may have heard that they think means that, or maybe some swear words or something like that. But it doesn't really come very far in terms of how you want to express yourself. And so can you imagine how awkward that stuff is? And usually it is. You stumble through it, and then, if you happen to be with that same person a while, you stumble through it some more, and then you just kind of know what each other wants, and you just sort of do it. I don't even know if you talk very much. You just go through the motions, and I guess you're together until, what it is with young people, every minute they have an argument about something, and there you go. So now whatever it was you did with that person, it might be the subject of gossip or conversations, and then everybody knows your business. I mean, you kind of remember that as a young person. And then when they started talking about sex, it was really big news because now people know what you're doing, and people kind of stare at you and make all kinds of assumptions about you. And, you're just living your life. You're obviously experimenting with things. I mean, there's other things that people have experimented with too. But, when it comes to the sex thing, it's really significant because like a lot of stuff, it can be life altering. And if you haven't had the talk, meaning about birth control and about where babies come from, well, sometimes you can stumble into something that is there's a lot more to it. And you may be in for some lessons that you didn't pay attention to when you were in the classroom. I remember my first conversation about condoms, and it came from a buddy of mine who said, make sure you use these. Now, I don't know where he learned about it, but I was glad that I had that bit of conversation. I mean, it was very brief. He told me about them, said you can go to the drugstore and get them. And I remember that conversation. I remember getting them, and that was a good piece of advice. And it was very straightforward. Unfortunately, there was no hype about it, and I didn't have any shame around it. I've got to take a break, but I'll be right back after this, and we'll cover this subject some more.
the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Travel Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hi there, welcome back. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast, and I have been talking about how when we started the sex thing in our lives, how did we have that sex talk? I mean, how did you learn about it? I don't mean not just the fact that, you know, we're talking about the birds and the bees thing, but when you were conversing with that person who was the object of your affection, how did that go about when you were young? I mean, were you really coordinated with the conversation, or were you trying to be really smooth about it, or was it awkward? And did you even have the words to be able to express what it was you were feeling or wanted? I know a lot of people have borrowed things that they've seen on television, and if you've watched something that was a little more explicit, if it were videos or saw things in magazines, then maybe you had some verbiage that you would use. But I remember being younger, and it wasn't something that was really skillful. I think you kind of had an idea that you wanted to have sex, but you kind of had to be real careful about if the person was really into you and wanting to have that conversation. Because I remember girls being told not to, because if they did, they were fast and they were worried about their reputation. And if somebody found out, then it would be gossipy, and it just would be a bad scene. So many of us spent more time talking about it than anything else. And it wasn't until you get a little bit older, more college age, and it, you know, when you're younger, you've had those fumbly sort of sexual experiences that don't really amount to a lot of time. I mean, it amounts to a lot of attempts. But when you're young, you know, where do you get the privacy to do a lot of this stuff? You don't. And it's not until you kind of are able to get your own spot, your own space, that you can manage to have more of these kinds of things happen. But obviously things do happen. You know, there's no question about it. I mean, I remember some people talking about cutting school and then slipping off and going home. And that was one way they got privacy, but I guess they had to explain themselves the next day. And you know, in some places too, if you have a closed campus, if you were, you know, middle school age or high school age, you probably couldn't take off unless you just didn't show up altogether. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. But it's really about having those sex talks. And what did it amount to for you? Did you learn anything about yourself? Did you learn anything about the person you were with? And, you know, how long did you stay with that person? And when you got into those conversations, were they really interesting? Or did you find yourself just sort of just trying to pass the time, trying to seem clever? Because, you know, if you wanted to be sexual with somebody, you had to seem like you were on top of it. You were on the ball for somebody to be interesting to you, or to seem interested in you. You had to seem like you were charismatic, and especially when you were young. I think we all imagined that when we were in school that the guys that got the girls were the ones who were on the basketball team or the football team or the baseball team, or the girls that got the guys were the ones who were the cheerleaders. And you know, all of these things are what go on in our minds. But you know what? There is the other things that are happening. There's the people in the science class who have an interest in somebody else in science. And I can remember thinking about, hey, a good way to meet somebody is to have a study person. And you can study in a lot of places, not just the library. You can do it other places on campus. And I know one of the ways that what made it interesting to get close to somebody is when you could study at their house, kind of get to meet their parents if you wanted to go that far and have your face shown. But you get to meet people, and then you kind of seem like you're on the in. And at least with that person, if you got the parents' approval, then a lot of times they made it okay for you to have a lot more personal time with them. And you could start having these conversations that are off topic, meaning not necessarily what the subject is of science or math, but something that's more personal. And you might even have had a little more free time because you didn't have the curfews the way you did. If your parents thought you were just out running the streets, you had to be home at a certain time. But if they knew that you were with this other individual that they have already approved of, well, you sort of got to expand your time, and that made more possibilities. So you could kind of talk about it. You can find out what the other person knew, and then see if there was some chemistry between the two of you. And you might have started out at kissing and doing a little fondling and seeing where that went. So that's kind of how it happened when I was younger. I remember people coming back and talking about their experiences. And I mean, I was a guy who was smart enough. I didn't want to use names, because what that sort of did is it sort of put the person that you were with on the spotlight. It was kind of like they were now living in a fishbowl because everybody was eyeballing them. And when you embarrass somebody, then they don't want to be around you anymore. At least that's the way I kind of felt if I wanted to keep something like that really private. So keep that. If you want to keep that person, then you kind of didn't blurt their name out. You just kept it private. And that's where I learned a lot about keeping my business my own business. I wonder if that's how it was for you. I remember some people really eager to show that they knew something, and they'd go bragging, and, people hear you bragging. They want to know, okay, well, where's your proof? And that was usually where people kind of overshared. They talked a little more about themselves than they should. And then it came down to one of those, okay, they go ask the person, and, people start denying things because, again, they don't want to be embarrassed. They don't want other people to know about their stuff, because what happens? That stuff gets in the wind. It circles back. And if you have siblings and your siblings hear about it, and then your parents hear about it, and it just becomes a real big embarrassing circle. So I always encourage people, look, keep your business to yourself. Don't go out there bragging about it, because you might be the one that's going to get embarrassed. I mean, this stuff is hard enough to learn about as it is. You wonder about, okay, who's going to tell you about the things that you want to know? And then if you ask certain questions, and it makes you seem like, oh, wow, this person is really weird, or they're out there. And when all of that stuff is really, really awkward. So it really can be difficult to have conversations and to fill the curiosity. Yeah, the clinical stuff is the clinical stuff. And anybody that's teaching that, they can't get too graphic about it. But it is nice when you can learn what it is you want to know about and not have to be in that experiment all the time. So, because if you see something in a movie, let's say a porn movie, do you know whether you should believe that or not? I mean, and if you've never seen any of that stuff before, you automatically suspend belief or suspend disbelief because it's erotic, it's enticing, it ties into something in you that says, ooh, I want to look at that, I want to know about that. But then when you walk away from it, you think about, wow, is that really what it's like? And you kind of wonder, well, what do I think? Well, most people probably find a partner and they do a lot of experimenting and learn something about it that way. Well, when you take all of the stuff that you learned as a kid about learning it wrong and or not learning it and being embarrassed and awkward and goofy, well, there's a lot of stuff to unlearn in all of that. Well, I think my time is about up, but I hope you've learned something about yourself, how you initially became sexual and how you had those conversations, and think about what you learned then and what over the years you have had to fix in your learning. Because we have those early perceptions about it. And with a little more time and a little more knowledge about life, we get more realistic about, number one, what turns us on, what turns us off, what we like about other people, what we think they like about us, and how we incorporate that into our intimacy or our expression, our self-expression of what we want our own sex life to look like. That's all I have time for. I'm John Johnson. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Sex Podcast.